Hey friends, 1980 Millennial, and today it is freezing outside here, so I decided it was a great day to put on makeup and record a dramatic review. So I purchased Gypsy Rose's first book, released, Conversation on the Eve of Freedom. It's available on Kindle right now for $5.49, and I do realize that by purchasing it, I put money into the pocket of a murderer, and I don't like that, but I can't help that it's somehow legal, apparently unless the Petries sue her, it's somehow legal for Gypsy Rose to publish these books and make money off of telling her story, which does involve her crime. Now, while I am sure that Gypsy Rose can find a way to do crimes with the $2.50 profit she is likely to get from me from this purchase, I've just got to live with that. And I purchased Fancy's book whenever I reviewed it. I also don't like that Fancy confuses the story so much by publishing transcripts from back when she believed the Blanchards and openly admits that none of this is correct or what she believes now. Why is she publishing? Anyway, but I bought Fancy's book whenever I wanted to review it. That's just my personal ethics. I feel like if I'm going to review the work that someone puts out, even if I don't think that they should be putting it out, that I should pay them for it. I wouldn't walk into Gypsy Rose's house and steal $2 from her because she admitted to murder. But so I'm not going to review her book without paying for it. That's just how I feel. Anyway, Gypsy's book here, she said that her and Melissa Moore wrote this because it is the prequel to her actual memoir. So I announced the other day we're going to do a dramatic review of her actual memoir when it comes out. But I thought it might be cool to take a look back at what she was saying in the prequel to her memoir, because everything's totally changed. Nothing ever stays the same long in Gypsyverse. So I've got my laptop here. You can't see it, but I've got my laptop with screenshots of the parts of her book I want to review. And in editing, I'll put those up on the screen so y'all can see as well. All right, let's get into it. Okay, so the book starts out with the usual stuff. We've got a preface, disclaimer that is kind of interesting because it says this book is based on the notes and recollections of Gypsy Rose Blanchard. Some names and other identifying details have been changed or omitted to protect the privacy of individuals. Any resemblance between a fictionalized name and a real person is strictly coincidental. The standard disclaimer that everybody knows is BS. The life of Gypsy Rose Blanchard and the murder of her mother, 48-year-old Claudine Dee Dee Blanchard, is one of the most compelling true crime cases the public has ever witnessed. It is also a story more bizarre than fiction and more layered than an onion. That is true. That's really the main reason why this is so popular in true crime, in the news, in whatever. It's because it's so freaking weird. It's weird. Now, at the bottom of that disclaimer, it mentions that on June 14th, 2015, an ominous status update on Dee Dee and Gypsy's shared Facebook page read, "That bitch is dead." Now, I remember people in my community who knew them freaking out after that happened, and then being even more absolutely upset, disturbed, traumatized, everything whenever Dee Dee's body was discovered, and they thought Gypsy was somewhere being tortured and possibly raped. It wasn't good. It wasn't good. They were very upset. Very. They carry a level of guilt and trauma to this day that is not, in my opinion, warranted. Not good. It's not healthy. That's what Gypsy left behind. And then it's mentioned that, which this is debatable, but I'm just going to read what it says. Dee Dee has abused and controlled her daughter as part of a fraud that garnered them hundreds of thousands of dollars in gifts, from free trips to medical treatments to their Habitat for Humanity home on volunteer way. Parts of that are true and parts aren't. Tell me in the comments what you believe. Okay, so now we're at a point where Gypsy is reading from a letter that she wrote to her mom as part of a class that she was doing. Apparently it was mandatory. It wasn't something that she volunteered to do because she thought it would help her. It was mandatory. So anyway, she wrote this letter, and here's a little interesting part of it. Your choice not to have me educated growing up has made it difficult to gain the appropriate level of education needed for a woman of my age, and has caused a depleted self-esteem and my ability to make achievements in society. When mentioning the overall lack of life experience that was withheld from me by your choice as my mother, you not only took away normal experiences that shape an individual to be who they are or could be, but you made the choice to keep me from the best things in life that make life worth living as a youth. The innocent joy of having your first day of school, the fun of going to a mall with friends and buying a dress that would surely never pass your approval, the excitement of being asked to prom. The issue I have with that is, as the chromosome disorder and all that other stuff have come to light and people are starting to doubt the Munchausen by proxy story, people who defend Gypsy are starting to shift a bit more to, oh, you need to understand, Gypsy just wanted to be a normal girl, a normal girl. Can you imagine? Can you imagine being withheld from school? Blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I can. I can. I told y'all before, there are a lot of extremely conservative religious sects, S-E-C-T-S, sects, in Southwest Missouri that homeschool their children, keep them restricted from technology, and make them dress in very conservative, basically 1800s clothes. I've experienced that. I left home. A lot of people experience that left home. I don't know of anyone else that killed their mothers in that area other than Gypsy Rose and Amelia Byrd. Make that what you will. Okay, so Gypsy continues on here. These are all things that I was not able to experience. It would be many years before I was able to fully understand the reasons why I grew up being isolated from others, being taken from hospital to hospital, doctor to doctor, blah, 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 blah. She goes on and on about that. Then she says, I have been searching for answers and spending my time trying to learn about myself as a person, trying to make sense of why all these events unfolded with this amount of tragedy. Well, a big part of the reason, Gypsy, is when you got the ability to go online and start researching, instead of researching how to get free, how to run away, all these things, you researched BDSM. That's what you did. It's a little interesting point here. Gypsy says, going forward, I will take my past and turn it from pain to perseverance, advocating for children who have suffered abuse at the hands of a parent, sharing my story with others to spread awareness of what Munchausen by proxy is. And y'all remember her advocacy video? She read off the definition. Like me and many other content creators have said, if she actually experienced something, she should be able to tell about her experiences and not have to just sit there and read off the definition. It makes everything debatable and doubtful. What's a reasonable doubt they call it in court? Yeah, we got reasonable doubt. So then we have a page that is really just straight up weird to me because it contradicts so many other things that Gypsy has said, which we all know is normal in Gypsyverse. She contradicts herself all the time. I don't think she really cares. It's just going along with her narrative at the moment. And all of her narratives, I believe, are part of her long game. Somehow, in her mind, they weave together and have her coming out as a Disney princess. Anyway, okay, y'all, let's take a look here. She says, in this class, this mandatory class, she learned how there are more victims than just her mother, that, there are all these other victims. She mentions our neighbors who loved us and cared for us. Yeah, they are victims, extreme victims, still being victimized. Anyway. And then she says, I hadn't thought of Nick as a victim before taking this class. And that's interesting because later on in the book, Gypsy talks about writing letters to Nick and telling him that she's sorry she got him into this. Why would she do that if she didn't think of him as a victim before this class? Do y'all know? Tell me in the comments. Okay, and then Gypsy gets a little weird again. She says, even though it doesn't make sense, I wake up in the night calling out for my mom because I miss her terribly. Terribly. That's a good word. Oh, and I succumbed to and overcame, and then again succumbed to, again and overcame again, yay, finally for good, an opioid addiction. With my new and cleaner brain, I tried to better my reading skills. The opioid addiction that she talks about, so that's the thing she said over and over and over when she came out. She wanted to advocate for things she'd been through. Well, we saw her advocacy for Munchausen by proxy. The only time she did any advocacy work where she appeared to actually kind of give a shit was whenever she was advocating for Amelia Byrd, which I've already done a video on. I can't find enough research information to come to an opinion on Amelia Byrd myself, but it is interesting to me that when Gypsy advocated for her, she never said Amelia's innocent. She kept saying the only evidence against her was the boyfriend's testimony. And that's not enough for me to think that she should be advocated for. It's just not. What do y'all think? But back to the point. So for all the things that she could advocate for, she says over and over that she was addicted to opioids. She was addicted to opioids at her mom's. She was addicted to opioids in prison. Why has there never been any advocacy on this? Never. Have any of you ever heard her say anything about this to actually advocate against opioid addiction? I haven't, but if you have, let me know in the comments, please. Okay, then we come to another super interesting part where Gypsy says, I decided that the first thing I want to do with my freedom is write my story. Why? Why, Gypsy? She has always been in the public eye. Dee Dee had her doing interviews, trying to meet celebrities, appearing. They were local public figures everywhere that they lived because that's what Dee Dee wanted. That's what she worked towards. That's what she did. And why on earth would Gypsy want to come out and continue that? Why? It doesn't make any sense unless she maybe liked the con. And there was another reason, Dan, that she actually had to get rid of Dee Dee. What do y'all think? And then another super interesting point just right after that. She says, okay, well, it's not the first thing. I actually plan to embrace my family and then celebrate New Year's at the Chiefs versus Bengal games. Priorities, right? Y'all, I did live in Missouri after all, but I swear, after Mahomes finishes the job, I will be focused on finding my words so I can share with you my story, the real story, the whole story. Writing a memoir wasn't my idea, it was y'all's. Oh, Gypsy. Okay, so this is what I've told y'all before. Gypsy is very attached to Missouri. She wants to think of herself as a Missouri girl. She had Chiefs merch that she got from her family at that party that she was planning on wearing to the game to try and meet Taylor Swift when Missouri, Taylor Swift, whoever, the Kansas City Chiefs, somebody called her parole and said, fix this. We can't have that murderer come into the game with a whole bunch of press and media and Lifetime cameras. And they called her, told her to get her ass out the state now. Go to Louisiana. And she's like, but my parole officer isn't ready for me. And Ryan's like, give me the phone. We had plans. Pre-planned. And they're like, we don't give a shit. Get the fuck out. Get out. And they had to. They had to go on down to Louisiana. So then we get to Gypsy talking about the act. And that's another thing that has changed over time. She says, at first, becoming a public figure overnight after the act aired brought unwelcome attention that was profoundly confusing and crazy-making. Imagine a crazy Gypsy who's been crazy-making. Oh, y'all, what do y'all think? Scary. Anyway, I had no frame of reference or context for what led the general viewing public to form their opinions. Your guilty plea, Gypsy. That was mainly it. It's been fairly quiet for a while now as my release date approaches, so I have gotten a head start on thinking about what I'd like to say and the best way to say it. A lot of blah, blah, blah stuff after that. I'll skip ahead. Okay, Gypsy says, I wish I had my memoir ready for you to read now as I prepare to walk out of the Chillicothe Correctional Center. But the book is like a year away. I told you, writing a book is hard, and I'm running out of time to finish it. My world was so small and that prison seemed big. That's a pretty small life. I didn't know how complex growing up is and how varied and nuanced life can be at the same time. I've had to think about the different themes in my life and how they can come together and shape a person. We know what the theme is. It's Disney. Over and over and over, it's Disney. You're not fooling anybody. It's Disney. I figure maybe I'll continue to get letters from strangers welcoming me home, wondering how I'm doing, and asking what I think about my time in prison and how I've reconciled with my past. Well, you got a lot of communication. So So I thought maybe I could at least have something short and sweet for y'all. So consider this ebook to be partly a cheat until the memoir is published, and part inside scoop on my private conversations with Melissa and then Michelle. Well, private-ish, since Chillicothe Correctional Center had the right to listen in and record them. The transcripts included here will give you a glimpse of the making of a memoir. That's kind of funny. It's, we've said before on this channel and in the comments that Gypsy and Fancy seem a bit like peas in the pod, and they both released transcript books this year. What do y'all think? And we have one of Gypsy's drawings from her class where she shows herself taking a hammer to the Habitat for Humanity house and her mom and everything, which maybe that was helpful to her. Cool. Then Gypsy and Melissa are talking about her impending release from parole, and Gypsy says, "I'm trying to keep it private and just share with close family. I don't want people to know because I don't want anyone to think I got off with no time." Another interesting point is Gypsy talks about friendship and trying to learn to be friends, and how in county jail she got close with another inmate and ended up confiding in them, and then the inmate went and told everything to a public officer or something. I don't know. Anyway, it's interesting for Gypsy to admit that and make that clear in public that she did confide in them, because there is an inmate that talked to Fancy and Brandy like 5 years ago. It's on one of Fancy's old lives whenever Fancy and Brandy were initially working together. They interviewed an inmate who claimed to have been in county with Gypsy, and if what she said was true about the things Gypsy told her, they were pretty freaking awful. That's the, I think, basis of a lot of things, like Gypsy saying that Nick and her were going to name their baby Aurora, and also that Gypsy told her, "I'm going to get away with this." Interesting. Here it is. And then Gypsy says, "And then that inmate went and told her public defender everything I had told her in confidence. So I remember my attorney coming to see me and telling me that the inmate I'd opened up to was trying to trade my secrets, which didn't even have much to do with the crime." Was that because you were talking about what you and Nick planned to do to the babies? Or about the fact that you were going to get away with this? You don't think that's related to your crime? Anyway, I'm just speculating, commentating, y'all. Just commentating. She says she had used me for her own benefit, and I had made myself a target of manipulation again. So when the parole board shared the news that they were granting me early parole, I didn't tell anyone in Chillicothe or outside my immediate family and Melissa. I had learned that people out there, especially when they have nothing to lose, can screw with you just out of spite or jealousy or their own self-interest. Seems a little self-reflective there, Gypsy. Anyway. Okay, we go through a long portion where Gypsy talks about the Petrie family, and some of the stuff she says about them is so horrific and so unconfirmed that I just don't even want to review it. I just don't. Sorry, y'all. Hope you can forgive me. Okay. Then we get to a part where Gypsy says, "According to Laura, my mother put Roundup, a toxic fertilizer, in her mother's food. And what's really interesting is that my mother and Laura, my stepmother Christy, all were nurses aides at the same hospital and actually all worked together." Now, I understand in small communities that is pretty normal. Like, you get one person from a family into a profession and there's not a huge work pool around. Other people from the same family end up getting in the same profession. But at the same time, with everything else that's come out, it's weird. After everything else that's come out, I think we can conclusively say that is weird that they all work together. Anyway, so Gypsy says, "I didn't realize that there were things in my life that weren't normal until I got to prison and worked through it all." I think that's bullshit. She was on the internet and, like, did she think BDSM was normal? Did she? Oh, y'all. Okay. Anyway. Okay, and then Gypsy says, even though she is not trying to play Freud, she has examined very deeply how all this might have seemed from her mother's perspective. And she says, "My mother's first portrayal by her own father was exacerbated by her husband, my father, asking for a divorce. And here I was, the third person, closer than close to her, that would betray her too. First by trying to run away, and then just pulling away because I wanted to grow up. And then when the murder happened, like, it just happened. Who had any control over it? It just happened." Okay, then Melissa says, tell me about when you and your dad learned that your mother lied to you all those years about him being a deadbeat. Well, that is, I know that there is some dispute of whether or not Rod willingly paid child support. Some people say that Dee Dee had to take him to court for it. I don't know. But I do know Dee Dee told everyone all over Southwest Missouri all the time that Rod didn't pay child support. They needed so much help and just couldn't get it. But they're just pitiful and trusting in God. And she said that they called Gypsy names, called her the R word, all kinds of just terrible stories constantly about Rod and Christy. And it did come out in the trial that Rod did pay child support. So there you go. There's a lot of people right now who really want to believe that Dee Dee was an absolutely good and loving mother who just fell into conning because she wanted to give her daughter the best life. And hey, I'm not super attached to my opinion on this. It may be wrong, but I don't think that's correct. I think Dee Dee was solely focused on not having to work, her and Gypsy not having to work, and would throw anyone under the bus. Anyone. Maybe I'm wrong. We'll see. Okay, Gypsy goes on to recount the story of Dee Dee telling that Rod came home drunk, picked up Gypsy by the neck, and was like, shut her up or I will. Dee Dee told that story in Southwest Missouri to people too. Who knows? But honestly, I just don't believe it. I could be wrong, but Rod doesn't seem violent to me. I just don't get that feeling from him. But hey, I've not gotten that feeling from people I've watched on TVs and interviews before, and then they go out and kill somebody. So who knows? Okay, so Gypsy says the discovery process in preparation for the trial was the first time she heard the term Munchausen by proxy. Now, something I haven't mentioned yet in this book, but I find kind of interesting, and maybe y'all already know about this. Tell me in the comments if you do. But Gypsy mentions several times that her first public defender's name was Clayt. She mentions here, listening to Clayt explain what he thought he saw jumping off the medical records and transcripts and interviews talking about the Munchausen by proxy. So I'm not sure when exactly did Mike Stanfield come in. We know, I believe that he was a public defender first off. Maybe I'm wrong on that, but yeah, she got a public defender first off, but his name wasn't Mike Stanfield. It was Clayt. Is that something we need to look into more, y'all? Is there a story there? Okay, then in another part, Melissa says, do you think they needed to learn to trust you too? They're talking about Rod and Christy. There are people out there who wonder if you are just conditioned to be a liar and a master manipulator. How do you feel about it? The Gypsy says, I really only care about what the people who love me think and believe. With them, I try to earn trust. If Gypsy only cared what the people who love her think and believe, why does she have such a strong reaction to the backlash that she gets from all of her public projects? She's off social media, supposedly, right now because of cyberbullying. Well, how do you even fall victim to cyberbullying if you actually don't care what people think? The two don't go together to me. What do y'all think? Then Gypsy says, I mean, I have definitely lied and I have broken trust and had to practice breaking out of the habit of deception. Habits aren't easily broke. How often do y'all think she falls back into that? We've all seen it. There are times I omit things to benefit me or make me out to be better than I am. Knowing this and finding the pattern is what makes it possible to undo bad habits. Okay. About 4 or 5 years ago, I was addicted to Suboxone, a medication to treat opioid addiction. I had lied to Christy and asked for $50. And I told her I broke a girl's CD player and I needed cash to reimburse the girl. She trusted me and I hurt that trust. I only admitted it last year. I told her it wasn't for a CD player. I used the money to buy drugs. And I told her how sorry I was. And she said, that wasn't right. I hurt trust. And she said, I forgive you and I love you the same. Wow, that's amazing, Melissa said. Then Gypsy goes on to talk about how she does understand why, people in the public might not trust her. And let's listen to a little description here. She says, I get it. Even I, after really breaking down my daily existence with my mother, am quite stunned as to how integrated I had been in daily deception. The wheelchair is an obvious example, but my mother also taught me at a very young age how to shoplift. We know this. She stole the knife for Nick. When my mother pressed the wheelchair accessible button at the entrance of our local Walmart, it was as if a stage curtain lifted. Personas entered through the automatic doors. Out in the world, Dee Dee, the caretaker, Gypsy, the special needs child, were public figures. Public figures. That's why I keep saying, y'all, Gypsy has always been a public figure. This isn't new. Melissa Moore didn't do it. Fancy didn't even do it. Christy Blanchard didn't even do it. Dee Dee and Gypsy did it. And Gypsy is being enabled to continue everything Dee Dee taught her. Okay, she says, we were a familiar pair in our small southern community of Springfield, Missouri. My mother handled the wheelchair determinedly and with ease that comes of long practice. Nobody suspected us. Some people did, but the climate was such that if you said anything about not thinking that this maybe was real or seemed kind of scammy, you would get jumped on by people who absolutely believe them. They'd be like, are you for real attacking a girl in a wheelchair? Hurricane Katrina victims? You actually think that that's all fake, that they want to be that way? They did, y'all. Okay, then Gypsy says, sitting in a wheelchair helps to more easily knock items into your lap and shove them under your princess dress. And for items that couldn't be sat on or hidden underneath my beanie cap, my mother taught me to use the brocade swap. Oh, barcode swap. I'm thinking brocade for princess dresses. Anyway, remove the barcode sticker from a cheaper item and place it on the more expensive item, then use the self-checkout lane. I'd be able to fit 14 or 15 CDs on me at Sam's Club since the door didn't have metal detectors. Y'all think those were Taylor Swift CDs? I do. Okay, in this part, whenever Gypsy talks about the whole facade and the con, it kind of sounds like she's describing herself in a starring role in a drama, a saga, a Disney princess story, if you will. Let's see what y'all think. She says, secrets and lies were my normal. Each secret and lie represented a huge facet of my life. My Habitat for Humanity house was a scam. The life I'm creating now. Oh, wait a minute. Go back a minute. The food my mother blended and fed into my feeding tube was a ruse. The Make-A-Wish trips were as fraudulent as the medical records and birth certificates that my mother doctored. Sitting in prison, I found that my recollections of my whole life were compromised, were erased one by one. It was as if the entire backdrop of my life had been a giant green screen, just the projected images of a home, a mother, and a community, all of which, with just one flick of a button, 17 stabs of a knife, a light turned off, were revealed to have never actually been there. She says, the life I'm creating now is not a facade. I know this because none of it is easy. Trust is hard work, and I keep effing up, learning how to not project my fears onto those who are closest to me, and to continue to really prove that the Gypsy whose default was to write a script, my mom is my best friend, is not here anymore. Okay, I'm going to break this in a few parts, y'all, because otherwise it could get really long. And I am working on new editing software, but right now the software that I use doesn't like to save a video over 30 minutes. So I'm trying to keep it relatively short, but more parts to come. Stay tuned, y'all.